Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey, and there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 430. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another exciting guest. Today, you will be hearing an episode with Sue-Ann Hickey. Now, I love talking about different sports and adventures that I'm not familiar with, and in this episode, we talk about two of them. We discuss kayak camping and solo cycling tours. We also talk about something called Bodytypology, which can help you get the energy you need to fuel your adventures. So who is Sue-Ann? Sue-Ann Hickey is a certified naturopath and weight loss specialist. Her passion is helping clients heal their ailments naturally, lose weight, and regain their energy and happiness using her personalized body type plan, Bodytypology, system for lasting weight loss. Sue-Ann combines this with Rapid Transformational, RTT, to uncover limiting beliefs and release them, creating permanent change and lasting healing. When she's not coaching clients or leading groups, she loves being in nature, as you will find out in this week's episode. So what are you going to learn? We talk about how Sue-Ann got into her solo cycling adventures, how she overcame her fears and stopped putting her dreams on hold, how she transitioned into kayak camping, totally different sport. We talk about Sue-Ann's top tips for solo cycling and other adventures, and we talk about how to get the energy you need to fuel your adventures through Bodytypology. But before we get into this week's episode, I wanted to mention a podcast that I was recently a guest on. I was a guest on the Butterfly Effect podcast with Tali Orad. And if you head over to hollywharton.com/butterfly, you can listen to our conversation about tree communication. Tali runs a really interesting nonprofit called Trillion, which you will learn more about in the episode. And I think I was a very different guest than the kind of guest she usually has on her podcast, but it was a great conversation about trees, and I hope you enjoy it. So again, head over to hollywharton.com/butterfly, and you can listen to that. Now, without further ado, let's get into this week's episode with Sue-Ann Hickey. Hello, Sue-Ann. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. I really look forward to talking to you about your outdoor adventures.
Yes, I'm excited to talk about everything that I've done as well. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start out by having us tell you a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Right. So I am a certified naturopath. I love to help people heal their ailments naturally. And I specialize in a body type weight loss. So there's 4 different body types and 4 different plans because I really believe that one size fits all never works.
I agree.
And so I've been doing that since 2006. Really love what I do. And now working by Zoom all around the world.
Yep. That's how it is now.
Yes.
All right. So what is your outdoor adventure of choice?
Right now, we've been doing this summer, we've switched to doing a lot of kayaking and kayak camping. So it's a little bit different, but what we're going to be talking about more today and sharing my stories was what I did for 4 years in a row was solo cycle touring, which was so much fun. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not a cyclist and I'm not a kayaker. So I have many questions. Before we get into the cycling bit, tell me a little bit about kayak camping, because that sounds like fun.
Oh, yeah. My boyfriend and I bought kayaks this summer. And I mean, similar to canoe camping, you paddle to wherever you want to go with all your gear in the canoe and set up and stay for as long as you have the food for it, I guess. But I decided I prefer like kayaking. It's a smaller vessel, so it's kind of lighter and, well, maybe not in weight size, but it's easier to paddle. And so we bought kayaks. And then the challenge is you have to fit all your camping gear inside the kayak. But we had a blast. We went to a few campgrounds. I live near Montreal, so we went to Ontario and in northern Quebec and paddled to the campsite and set up. And it was just gorgeous because you're really away from anyone else. The campsites are often very secluded, not like the regular camping or car camping where you can hear them cough. They're so close together. So yeah, we were just thrilled to do this and looking forward to lots more adventures like that.
So are these campsites that are just for people who are coming from the water, or are people also able to drive in there or hike in there as well?
Yeah, the ones we went to were only if you paddled in.
Wow.
And a lot of people that are maybe more adventurous do a lot of portaging. So they go from lake to lake and paddle in portage. Wow. So carrying their gear and the canoes on. So we didn't do that, but just the paddling and going to the spots was great.
Wow, that sounds like such a huge adventure because you're totally off the beaten track, really. I mean, usually we're used to kind of hiking or running down trails and water is just a completely different scene. I don't know. It's just like a completely different path. Yeah. You can call it that.
Yeah. So nice to be in such a calm place. Go swimming. There's many different campsites. Some of them you just get out on rocks and hike up and there's a nice big flat area.
Nice.
And we did see one a little bit further past the one that we had chosen that had a beach. We're like, oh, we should have gone a little bit further, but we were fine where we were.
Nice. So how many months of the year can you do this? How far into winter can you do kayak camping?
Yeah. I mean, right now it's October 7th and we're having a really warm spell. So you probably, you might have been able to go out this weekend near Montreal, but I guess it depends on the person, how good your sleeping bag is.
Yeah, but also the water, because water is cold.
Yeah, but you don't have to necessarily go in the water. Yeah, it depends on your comfort zone of, I guess you could start in May, June and go till September, October. I prefer camping really summer. I mean, that being said, with a good sleeping bag and proper clothes, you could go a little bit later. Yeah.
Nice. So how did you shift from cycling into kayak camping?
Well, I've always loved cycling. I've always done a ton of cycling. And I met my boyfriend almost 3 years ago. And while he likes cycling, he's not as big a fan as I am, but he was very keen on buying a kayak. And we live not too far away from a place where we can launch our kayaks here, and also was open to doing adventures. So I guess he was maybe more keen to do. He loves camping as well. So it was easier to do the kayak camping. I think we did do a short cycle touring where we carried our gear, but we didn't carry a tent. We stayed inside an inn and he enjoyed that. But he has said that he's not as interested in doing the amount of distance that I have done in the past.
All right. So now we're going to hear about that. So how did you get into cycling?
As I said, I've always loved from a young age being on my bike and flying along the streets at a fast pace. When I was young, we used to take a rope and tie it to like the bottom of the bicycle seat. And then your friend would hold on to the rope and on roller skates. So it's kind of like water skiing on roller skates, which was probably like pretty dangerous. And yeah, we used to do things like that. So, and then I just transitioned. It was actually when I was around 30. I read a book called Miles from Nowhere about a couple that cycle toured around the world for over 2 years. And when I read this book, I always loved traveling. I'm Sagittarius, so I love to travel. And when I read this book, it's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. I want to do the same thing. And they had done this in the 70s. So that was a long time before it was very popular. They were, the pioneers, so to speak. And my boyfriend at the time said, okay, yeah, that sounds interesting. So we started planning our trip and organizing things. And after a few months, he said, you know what, this is your dream, not mine. I'm not going. So I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to cycle tour around the world as planned, but I am going to do my trip around the world, with my backpack. And I set off on my own. We ended up, of course, not continuing our relationship after a while. But I still always wanted to do the cycle touring. And I thought that I couldn't do it alone. I thought, well, to carry all the gear, it's going to be very heavy and I can't do that on my own. And so for over 20 years, I didn't.
Wow.
Yeah. And then one summer, I was talking to a girlfriend saying, I don't know I want to do something different this summer for my vacation. I want to go to the East Coast. I've never been there, and go to the ocean. And she said, well, you can just take your bike on the train and then go cycle touring. And I thought a little bit, and I thought, I could do that. And I'm going to do it finally. Yeah.
And did you have any fears? Because you mentioned, having to carry a lot of gear. Can you do it? But did you have any personal safety fears? Because I think a lot of women are really afraid to venture out on their own because of personal safety fears.
Yes. And some of my girlfriends were like, you're doing what? That's dangerous. How can you camp alone? For myself, I guess not really many fears. When I did do my around the world trip backpacking, I was in India for 6 months alone and, staying in Indonesia and different places in Asia and traveling the whole time alone. Obviously, you meet a lot of people, but I always kind of maintained that what we focus on expands. So I'm not going to focus on any negative or fear and just focus on enjoying the moment and having fun. So I felt safe in campgrounds. There's always a lot of people around.
Yeah.
And I think the first year I probably carried like a bear spray or something, but I didn't use it. And sometimes you're a little scared at night sleeping alone, but just kind of let go of that thought, I guess.
So where did you go on your first solo cycle tour?
My first solo cycle tour was, the east coast of Canada, as I mentioned. So I went on the Cabot Trail, which is beautiful and extremely hilly, which was, pretty hard. And I also took a bus over and went around Prince Edward Island, which was also
nice.
Beautiful.
Lovely. And where else have you gone? Because you were really into solo cycling for 4 years, you said?
Yeah.
So where else have you gone?
Yeah, so one was through the White Mountains and New Hampshire and Maine, which was also hilly in the mountains, obviously, and the Gaspé. And third one was, memory blank here, also in where did I go? Around Quebec, Quebec,
And what have you learned from your experiences? Like, as you went on different cycling adventures, what did you learn about yourself?
Just, I guess, tapping into my own strength and reserve, that I can accomplish great feats on my own, not to put off for so long your goals. And it wasn't hard when you think about it. The only things that, if you were two people that you'd be sharing the weight of would be a tent and cooking stove and things like that. And they make everything so ultra lightweight now. It's not really a problem. So I learned, I guess, to seize the day and follow your dreams. Don't put it off and believe in yourself. And you can do so many things on our own. We don't have to wait to be in a relationship or have a partner or have someone join us to do what we want to do.
Absolutely. Or wait for friends, because sometimes friends have different interests.
Yes.
So how has this impacted the rest of your life?
Good question. I guess there's always a lot of challenges and hardships when you are traveling in various different ways. When I was in India, you might not have running water in some towns and might have to pump water from a well and things like that. And there's no hot showers. You're having cold showers. So just overcoming these challenges, I'll never forget on my first cycle tour, it was raining again, and I really don't like biking in the rain, and I was miserable, and I couldn't, the next town was far away, and I texted a friend and I said, this is really hard and it's raining. And she said, oh yeah, it must be really hard. But, I'm just undergoing my next treatment of chemotherapy, because she was going through cancer at the time. And so I was like, okay, Sue-Ann, this may be hard, but let's put it into perspective here and just be grateful for what we have. And know that these small challenges that we have that we can complain about a lot really are not that bad.
Yeah, absolutely. It really helps to have that perspective from other people sometimes.
Yes.
So what would be your top tips for someone listening to this who maybe thinks, oh, I like cycling, but I don't know if I can do it? Like, what are your tips for helping someone get started?
Yeah, I would say, there's so many YouTube videos and things like that. And I'm fascinated by watching other people that cycle tour long distances. So just to do a bit of research, know that you can do it, whether you're solo or two people. check out the routes before, and like the elevation I found it really funny when I went in the White Mountains. I did my first night of camping, and the next day I just got on my bike and I knew I had to go from A to B. So I got on my bike and started going, and it kept on going up and up and up and up. And I'm like, holy smokes, so this is going up forever. Because I hadn't looked at like the elevation or the route really. I just knew where. So I would say look at the elevation, because I didn't know that I was going over this huge mountain pass that day. And that was like the start of my trip. But it turned out for the best, because while it was a big climb, the descent was like really gradual and long. So that was really amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's so much amazing gear. What I did my first year was I borrowed my tent and the bags from a friend to see if I liked it. So I would suggest that too. You can borrow things from people, or even a lot of sporting things, rent the equipment, and then you can see if you really like it. And when I did decide that, wow, this is something I really love, the next year I bought like the high-end waterproof bags and upped my equipment. But even at that, like my bike is a really old hybrid, which worked perfectly well. So
I think that's an important tip, because I think a lot of people look at all the gear and they think, oh, I'm going to have to spend so much money. And if I'm new to this, how do I know that I want to commit to this? But as you said, there are places where you can rent gear, you can borrow things. I remember before I got into camping, I did this wild camping course. It was basically just I went wild camping with this guy for a weekend, but he loaned me all of his gear. He loaned me his tent and his wife's backpack and like camping stove and stuff. And I got to try everything out. And it really helped me to understand, A, I don't have to start out with the high-end stuff, and B, how this stuff works. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I want to buy it? That kind of thing. So I think there's so many options when you're getting started to not necessarily spend a ton of money from the beginning.
Right. 100% agree. And one thing, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I did cycle touring, was it was also a really inexpensive way to travel and to be able to do these trips. And camping is not expensive. And I bought my own food, had my little cook stove. So, I mean, my trips were really, really not expensive at all. And borrowing some of the equipment to start kept the cost down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and in Quebec, we have all the provincial parks. They have a lot of them set up called, in French, Bienvenue Cycliste, welcome cyclist, where you can camp. If you arrive by bike, you can camp. It's like $7-8 a night instead of the regular $35 or more.
Wow.
So they weren't often the best campsites, mind you. It's like, seriously, dudes, we've been biking hard all day and you give us the site beside the mosquito-infested swamp. But no, that only happened once and I didn't even stay there. I'm like, yeah, I'm switching over to another regular campground. Thank you very much.
So how long were each of these cycling tours?
Around 2 weeks, some like 10 days to 2 weeks. Yeah, which I found a perfect amount of time.
Yeah, I feel like 2 weeks is such a good time to really disconnect from your normal life and really get into the rhythm of whatever adventure it is that you're doing. I think it's a really nice time period.
Yes.
And what about the fitness required? Were you really kind of cycling fit before you started doing this, or did you kind of get fit as you went along?
A little bit of both, but I would say no, I was really quite cycling fit because I had been a member of a cycling club for many years and I did a lot of rides with them. And I would make sure before I went, usually I did my tours in August. So in July, I would be making sure I was doing some hills and getting ready because it is hard. The first book that I talked about, Miles from Nowhere, was pretty funny, their adventure, because they didn't really train much at all. They were eating really a lot of junk food and all kinds of things. So they slowly transitioned as they went along. They were in so much pain, obviously, the first days. And then they started just eating healthier naturally because they needed that, good, healthy fuel. So I did make sure I was in pretty good shape because the hills are hard on a fully loaded bike. My bike weighed 30 pounds and the gear was about 30 pounds. So it's a lot.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask, because you were talking about being in the mountains and going up and up and up. And I was just thinking, my God, I can't imagine having that level of fitness. I mean, I'm a runner and a hiker, but carrying all that weight and cycling up a mountain just sounds really, really challenging. So that sounds like a huge adventure.
Yes. And I mean, that being said, I find like if you imagine carrying that weight, you couldn't, but rolling is easier.
Yeah.
what goes up must come down. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's the only good thing about going up a hill. You get the view at the top and then you get a little bit of easy
Yes.
downhill.
The other thing I love about cycle touring is that, unlike a car, you can stop anywhere on the side of the road and take pictures and get to know the locals a little more. I think my trip to the Gaspé, the east coast of Quebec, was where the people were the most friendly, and they were used to seeing a lot of cycle tourists because a lot of people do the loop around the coast there. And they were constantly, let's go, bravo, good for you, and cheering me on. So that was really nice.
And were you mostly doing riding on roads on these cycle tours, or were you also doing some trail?
Roads. Yeah. I have a friend who goes on trails, but hats off to him because I find it easier for the wheels to be on like smooth pavement. And so all roads.
Interesting. So I wanted to segue a little bit and to talk about body typology, because I think that's really fascinating. So what is body typology and how can it help with fitness and adventures?
Yes, so it comes from quite a ways back, but there was one book written by Dr. Abravanel in the 1980s who distinguished these 4 different body types for women and 3 for men, and that each body type is very unique. We're all unique. We have different cravings, different energy levels. And when we eat the right foods at the right time for our body type, we can give the body exactly what it needs at the right time. So for me, learning about this completely changed my whole life and health. So the way it works is we distinguish 4 different glands: the adrenals, pituitary, thyroid, or for the woman only gonad, which has to do with the ovaries. It doesn't mean that anything is wrong with those glands. It's just that we all have a dominant gland that's working harder than the others. So as I mentioned, when you eat the right foods at the right time, the dominant gland calms down and the others get stronger. So also the way it works is, say someone's kind of slow in the morning, takes them a while to get going, could indicate that their metabolism is slow, and a small light breakfast would be perfect for them. Lunch would be like a medium to light lunch, and dinner would be the main meal of the day. That's when their metabolism is highest, and that's when they're going to burn it off most easily. So it goes completely against the old adage of eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. For some types, and I see this all the time, some body types, if they eat a big breakfast, that can trigger them to be hungrier all day long, and they'll be eating more and they'll gain weight, and they won't understand why they don't feel well and don't have the energy levels, and their energy will crash in the afternoon after maybe a lunch that's too heavy for their body type. So yeah, it works amazing. It works amazing for athletes. For myself, I was having a bowl of cereal for breakfast, which wasn't enough for my body type. I'm like a super energetic morning type, so I need protein, like 2 eggs is best for me. And when I made the changes, I felt so much more balanced. I wasn't hungry all day long. My cravings went down. I felt like I used to yawn in the afternoon for like half an hour nonstop. That was gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. I'm eating this way for the rest of my life, and I want to tell everyone else how to do it as well.
I think that's really interesting what you said about how the names of each body type don't necessarily correspond to an imbalance in that.
Yes, exactly. Gland. People get thrown off. They see, oh, I have hypothyroid, so therefore I must be a thyroid type. No, completely wrong. It's anyone can have hypothyroid and be any type. So it doesn't have to do with something wrong with the glands at all.
Yeah, I was just going through your website earlier today and I saw the quiz and I was like, oh, I wonder what I am. Obviously, I'm a thyroid because I'm a hypothyroid, but no, I was not. So I think that's really useful.
Yes.
And do you also, depending on your body typology, do you eat, you'd mentioned that switching from cereal to eggs in the morning gave you more energy and less cravings. Does that mean that each body type requires or prefers different types of food?
Yeah, each body type has different foods that are best for them at different times of the day. And also, for weight loss, I work a lot with people that want to lose weight, foods to avoid for their body type and foods to increase. So yeah, it really, it's quite specific for each body type, and everyone is different.
How has this helped you with your fitness levels and your adventures?
There was a lot of things, obviously, that I learned when I was starting to take my classes to be a naturopath that I implemented. I had been vegetarian for 16 years, and I believe a plant-based diet is one of the healthiest diets that we can eat. However, for my body type, my teacher explained that I was lacking in protein. So I was also probably low in iron at the time and also low in B12. So when I started implementing all these things, and especially eating right for my body type, I went from just being very weak. I had just joined the Beaconsfield, my cycling club at the same time. I went from being one of the slowest riders, which is kind of normal when if you've never done a lot of road biking before. And after a year or two, I was one of the fastest women in a club with 450 members.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's a huge shift.
Yes. Yeah. People were like, what are you doing? Like, what are you eating? What kind of protein powder are you using?
And was there also weight loss involved, or was it just the extra energy you got from eating the right foods at the right times?
Yeah, for myself, I didn't really need to lose weight. I actually gained a little bit of weight because just,
muscle.
I mean, yeah, I guess muscle and just from needing a little bit more weight on my frame. But yeah, I've been fortunate that I've always a pretty healthy diet and maintained my weight.
Well, I think that's really interesting because obviously for anyone who's into adventures, sports, fitness, you need energy to do those things. And if you don't have the energy you need, that's really, really frustrating.
Yeah, when I first joined the cycling club, I would do the ride, which mind you could be like we started with 40 kilometers and worked up each week. They would get longer, but I would come home and I would be on the couch, unable to move for the rest of the day. And I remember cycling along when I first started and one of the older members coming up beside me because I would pedal and coast, which is the worst thing if you're in a group because you're going fast and slow. And the people behind you are like, would you just maintain your speed? And the guy was there, can you just keep on pedaling? And I told him I can't, I'm too tired. Yeah, for sure. That changed over time.
That's impressive. So what would be your tips for someone who wanted to learn about their body typology? Obviously, you have this quiz on your website, which was very easy to fill out. What should people do to learn more?
Yeah, they can check out my website, bodytypology.com. I must say the quiz is there more to incite interest because, you can't really figure out a person's body type with, I think it's 12 questions that I have on there. I mean, it's kind of give you an idea. You may be what we call more of a salty type, the adrenal or gonad, or more the types that crave more sweets, the thyroid or pituitary. But also looking on my site at the different descriptions of each type, it's quite in depth. And most people, when they start reading the full description, it's like, oh, yeah, that totally sounds like me. Because even the personality, food cravings, food preferences, energy levels, that's how I figure out a person's body type. When I do a consultation, I go through all the different things, looking at that, and also typical ailments that people are most prone to. And I have an ebook on there that gives all the information about how to eat right for your body type. And I'm writing the body typology book. Plan to be published in spring 2022. So getting there.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, as we just said, talking about your website, bodytypology.com, where else can people find you online? What social networks do you hang out on?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram mostly, and it's the same, bodytypology.com, or under my name, Sue Ann Hickey, on Facebook. They can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Great. And do you have any final tips for women who might be afraid to get into solo adventures, solo cycling, or something else, but are really tempted?
Yeah, for sure. Just know that you can do it. Believe in yourself, with some training. And as we mentioned, you don't need to invest a lot of money when you're starting out, but for sure, try out these things. And I believe also at any age, we can try out any different kinds of sports. I always maintain that as long as we're eating healthy and, following a healthy lifestyle, we can keep on hiking and biking and doing all the things that we love until a ripe old age, and not buy into the thought that, if I get older, I'm going to have a lot of aches and pains and need a lot of medications. No, take care of your body now, eat healthy now, and move, and you can continue doing this hopefully into our 90s.
Yes, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I loved hearing about your solo cycling adventures.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Holly.
Thank you. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me online and get in touch there. Also, if you found this topic interesting, you might want to check out these related episodes. Episode 429 with Kelly Howard, just last week, we talk about breaking through internal barriers to our adventures. Episode 414 with Rebecca Walsh, we talk about solo hiking for women. Episode 408, Solo 1, I talk about starting with where you are. 383 with Anne Malambo, we discuss how solo travel can change our lives. And finally, solo episode 367, I talk about finding yourself through solo travel and outdoor adventures. So, as I've mentioned before, I am finally accepting applications for podcast guests. If you are interested in being a guest, you can head over to hollywharton.com/pitch and fill out the form there. If you know of anyone who would be perfect for the show, please feel free to send them the link, and thank you very much. I love meeting new people, and I'm really enjoying having new guests on the show. Thank you so much for listening, and remember to visit hollywharton.com/430 for the show notes on this episode. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.